Welcome to the main event deep dive for UFC 266, and we have an absolute banger of a card and an absolute banger of a main event as well. We have Alexander Volkanovski going against Brian Ortega, a fight that I'm really looking forward to. Before we get started and break it all down, if you guys can leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Going to have a ton of content coming out throughout the week. My full card breakdown and prediction video will be out on Tuesday morning, a live stream on Friday after the weigh-ins at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, and then going live Saturday before the fights to give a live stream called Best Bet, where we give the best bet for every fight on the card. Me, Uncle Weezy, and Narco Cobb. Great stream there. So I say we get into it. Uncle Weezy, what is up? Are you looking forward to this fight?
Looking forward to this entire card. There's so many great fights on this card, so many great fighters, some of the best at each division. The return of Nick Diaz. I mean, UFC 266 is going to be a banger from the curtain jerker to the main event. So I'm excited to break down every single fight on this card. But, I mean, come on. We got a championship fight, a 5-rounder, Ortega, Volkanovski. These guys were coaches on The Ultimate Fighter. A little bit of a rivalry that started up there. So I'm really looking forward to this fight. It's been a while since we've seen Volkanovski in the cage. So it's going to be exciting to see him again. I can't wait to break it down with you, man.
For sure. So I say we get right into it then. So we do have the main event here, 266. Great card, like we said. Volkanovski going against Brian Ortega. Volkanovski, he is 32 years old, 5'6" with a 71-inch reach. And Brian Ortega, he is 30 years old, 5'8" with a 69-inch reach. So Ortega is going to be 2 years younger. He's going to have a 2-inch height advantage, but he's going to have a 2-inch reach disadvantage. So we'll take a look at their last few fights between the two. Alexander Volkanovski is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. A decision win over Chad Mendes, a knockout win over Jose Aldo, a decision win over Max Holloway, and then decision win over loss to Max Holloway, and then a decision win against the Korean Zombie just recently. So both guys are looking good as of late. Uncle Weezy, what do you have for us for the very first experience stats?
Yeah, the experience stats are edged to Volkanovski here. He's got 6 more professional fights than Brian Ortega. He's got about 50 more minutes of cage time overall compared to Ortega. Average fight time for both of these guys is right around 11 minutes. And we see that Brian Ortega has been a pro mixed martial artist for 2 years longer. So 12 years and 17 fights for Ortega, or almost 12 years. And 9 years and 23 fights for Volkanovski. So we see at about 2.5 fights per year, Volkanovski's been the more busy mixed martial artist. And then we see both of these guys have 9 fights in the UFC. Volkanovski still undefeated at 9-0 in the UFC, while Ortega is 7-1 with a no contest. The no contest was his very first fight against El Cucuy, Mike De La Torre. And I don't know why that was a no contest. I don't know if it was like weed or if it was actual performance enhancers. But if you throw out that, let's say it was weed, he would be 8-1, So both of these guys hate to lose in the UFC. Between 18 fights, only one legit loss, and that was for Ortega by knockout, late in the fight against Max Holloway, who was dominating him. So, the experience numbers, a slight edge for Volkanovski, and then the tail of the tape, we got Ortega 2 years younger. We got Ortega 2 inches taller, but we got Volkanovski with a 2-inch reach advantage. So, not much of an advantage either place there, tail of the tape wise or pro experience wise. But we'll talk about the finish numbers soon. But yeah, it's already looking close here.
Yeah, for sure. So Volkanovski is going to be the more active fighter, right? Brian Ortega did take that 2-year layoff after that Max Holloway fight. It looked like a life-changing beating, right? And he comes back and he just looks phenomenal. Looks like a new person in that Korean Zombie fight. We'll talk more about that. But yeah, in terms of the finish stats, it's pretty interesting. As we do see that the fight doesn't go to decision is around like plus money, plus 100, and the fight the fight goes to decision is at minus or plus 120, my bad. And the fight goes to decision is at minus 150. So let's get into these finish stats and see what we see here.
Yeah, so Volkanovski, 64% finish rate in 22 wins. So I think that is 13 out of 22, if my math off the top of my head is correct. So and then we got Ortega at 67%. So 10 of his 15 wins have come inside the distance. And then if we look at the losses, Ortega's only lost once. It was by KO. And Volkanovski's only lost once, and it was by KO. So, but only 2 losses, but both of them coming inside the distance. We see that Volkanovski's knocking people out 50% of the time when he finishes, and then the subs are 14% of the time. While for Ortega, he's a little bit more likely to submit his opponent, as he has a 47% submission rate and a 20% knockout rate. So Ortega, the slightly better finisher, and the slightly more diverse finisher, is he can knock you out and submit you. While I think for Volkanovski, we're looking at 3 career submissions, and obviously none of them coming in the UFC. So in the UFC, we've seen 3 submissions and 3 knockouts for Ortega, and we've seen 3 knockouts for Volkanovski, but 6 wins by decision. So, it looks like Volkanovski's been very comfortable sticking with his striking for 5 rounds and outpointing his opponents, winning minutes, banking rounds, and winning fights that way. Some very close fights against Max Holloway. But they've both been finished in their only loss. This is 5 rounds, and both of these guys do know how to finish. So, I can see why the bookies are actually saying that this thing probably finishes inside the distance more times than it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's tough because I think if there is going to be a finish, I think it's more than likely going to be on the Ortega fight or on Ortega's side. You mentioned Volkanovski, around 6 decisions in the UFC, so he hasn't really been finishing much in the UFC, but he does have that power. And I went back and watched tape on Ortega, and he looked completely different in that Korean Zombie fight than he has in the past. Like he is very, very hittable. And I'm not talking about the Max Holloway fight, because we'll get into that, because Max Holloway set like a record at the time, landed 290 significant strikes against him, and then Max Holloway eventually went on to break his own record against Calvin Kattar. But it just shows you how hittable Brian Ortega is. I remember going back and watching that Cub Swanson fight. Cub Swanson was outlanding him a ton in that first round. And then the thing about Ortega is he's just so dangerous. He can be losing the entire fight, losing every single second of a fight until he, finds a submission, until he, lands a hard shot. So that's what makes this fight so tricky to me. And like I said, I think if there is a finish in the fight, I think it's more so from the Ortega side. But I don't know. Volkanovski, like you said, he hits hard, and Ortega's still very, very hittable. But curious to hear the striking stats. And this is something that's really interesting to me, because it's always something funny to bring up, because, man, Ortega's striking stats look atrocious, right? And it's mostly because of that Max Holloway fight. But even if you take out the Max Holloway fight, he's still getting outlanded in just about every fight. So why don't you talk about the striking stats? I think they're very interesting.
Absolutely. You're right. Ortega's striking stats look god awful. And then, you would say that, oh, wow, well, next to that, Volkanovski's look great. Well, next to just about everybody's, Volkanovski's look great. I mean, this is just on paper. I mean, it's all Volkanovski in the striking stats. So let's get into it. 6.02 significant strikes landed per minute, 3.31 absorbed for Volkanovski, a positive 2.7 significant strike differential, while Brian Ortega lands 4.29 significant strikes and absorbs 6.28 per minute. So a -2 significant strike differential for Brian Ortega. Then let's look at the accuracy. 56% striking accuracy for Volkanovski, 38% striking accuracy for Ortega. So just not only is Volkanovski throwing just as much volume and landing almost 2 more significant strikes a minute than Ortega, he's also about 17% more efficient on accuracy. Now, both of these guys showing some power. Volkanovski around 0.5% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed, which means he's landed 4 knockdowns in 821 significant strikes landed for Volkanovski. And then if we look at 1.03% significant knockdowns per total significant strikes landed for Brian Ortega, means that he has landed 5 knockdowns in 486 significant strikes landed. So he is averaging, Ortega is 0.66 knockdowns per 15 minutes, and Volkanovski's averaging 0.44. So both of these guys showing pretty good power for the featherweight division here. If we look defensively, we're going to see that Alex Volkanovski has a 60.37% striking defense. That's excellent. And it's much lower for Ortega at 52. And, the negative 2 significant strike differential for Ortega, while we look at a positive 2.7 for Volkanovski. So that's probably putting Volkanovski in the top 5% for striking differential in the entire division. And Ortega's probably in the bottom 5%. And this is a guy who's, challenging for a title here. So I think it's pretty safe that even though we've seen Volkanovski go to his wrestling quite a bit when he came into the UFC, we can call this a striker versus grappler matchup. We know that even though Ortega has had some success with his striking and has shown pretty good power numbers, that his best path is probably going to be getting this fight to the ground or getting a submission attempt locked in, because Alex Volkanovski is much better defensively, and he just seems to have a much better understanding of how to outpoint his opponents in the striking game. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, those striking numbers for Volkanovski are crazy, right? You mentioned a positive 2.71 significant strike differential. And something interesting, going back before the Korean Zombie fight for Ortega, like I said, he's getting outlanded by not only Max Holloway, he got outlanded 290-10 in that fight, but he got outlanded against Frankie Edgar in a fight that he won 27-25. He got outlanded by Cub Swanson in a fight that he won 60-24. He got outlanded by Moicano 109-65 in a fight that he won. He tied Clay Guida 62 apiece. He got outlanded by Diego Brando 56-29, and then he actually outlanded Thiago Tavares 41-39, and then he got outlanded in his very first UFC fight 6-3 in a fight that got overturned. So he's getting outlanded in pretty much every single fight, which is very interesting. And, just taking a look at the stats and watching the tape, man, I think it's going to be the same exact thing here. I think Volkanovski is going to have a lot of success on the feet. I think he's the much better striker. Ortega is very, very hittable. But what I will say is he took that 2-year layoff. He came back against the Korean Zombie, and he looked a lot better defensively. He looked a lot better in terms of his striking. He looked more defensively sound, and he hit the Korean Zombie with some very hard shots. It was that spinning back up. I think it was like in the second round. Korean Zombie rushed in, and it would have knocked out anybody else besides Korean Zombie. The guy has a zombie chin, and I think Volkanovski is going to have a ton of success in this fight in terms of the striking. It's just he's going to have to worry about that power. I thought the Korean Zombie, going back and watching it, had a lot more success than I remembered prior to getting hurt bad. He was hitting Ortega, but once he got hurt, it seemed like he could not really get back in the fight. And Ortega kind of, took over as the fight went on and was not able to finish Zombie, but he put on a masterclass performance there. And I guess that's the one thing I'm worried about on the Ortega side is just how dangerous this guy is. And not only on the mat, we know how dangerous this guy is on the mat. And not even then, like he sometimes he doesn't even need to get takedowns to find a submission. I think it was in that Cub Swanson fight where it was like a standing guillotine. He pulled guard. He is just so dangerous anywhere the fight goes. And I think Volkanovski is the better fighter. I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. It's just the danger of Ortega is what's scaring me off a little bit. But yeah, in the striking, I think it's pretty clear. Volkanovski all day. Those are phenomenal numbers on the Volkanovski side. And Ortega, although I do see some improvements, I do think he's going to be at a striking disadvantage. In terms of, who's more dangerous, I kind of think Ortega is the more dangerous all-around fighter. He has the submission game. He has the power he's shown in his last fight. So Volkanovski is going to have to, mind his P's and Q's for 25 minutes. And, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. He got hurt a few times in the Max Holloway fight. I think Ortega is a lot more dangerous than Max Holloway. Max Holloway is somebody that puts it on you with a ton of volume. Ortega, I don't know. Weezy. It's a tough one to call because I think Volkanovski is going to be winning the minutes of this fight with the striking, but the danger of Ortega is kind of scaring me off a little bit.
That's perfect analysis. Volkanovski's the minute winner, and Ortega's the guy who can change the fight in 1 second, and we've seen him do it so many times, whether it's with a submission attempt or whether it's with some perfectly placed and timed strike. He is incredibly dangerous. And so let's go into these grappling statistics here, because I think they're also very interesting. We see Volkanovski, 9 UFC fights, 55 takedown attempts. So, that's about a little over 5.5 takedown attempts per fight. He's gotten 19 of them for a 34.55% takedown accuracy. 2.09 takedowns per 15 minutes, and 27.23% control time. However, I don't recall seeing any takedown attempts from our guy here, Volkanovski, in quite a long time. It seems like it was something he was using when he first came into the UFC, and has lately fallen in love with that striking, and has just kind of put that side of that part of his game in his back pocket for now. And then we look at Ortega, not as efficient of a wrestler, not as willing of a wrestler on the aggregate. 9 fights for Ortega, 28 takedown attempts. So about exactly half the amount of takedown attempts for Ortega compared to Volkanovski. And he's only gotten 6 of them. So a 21.43% takedown accuracy, very low. 0.8 takedowns per 15 minutes, but he is averaging more than 1 submission attempt per 15 minutes. And that's dangerous, because this guy, when he goes for submissions, he gets them more often than he doesn't. And 6.86% control time for Ortega. And let's look at the defensive side here. Volkanovski showing 72.73% takedown defense. He has successfully defended 16 of 22 takedowns against him. 0.66 takedowns allowed per 15 minutes. He's never had a submission attempted against him, which is a nice little statistic to see against somebody as dangerous as Brian Ortega. And then he's only yielded Alex Volkanovski 3.41% control time. So we are looking at about between a 7 and an 8 to 1 control time ratio for Volkanovski. About 7.5 seconds of control time for Volkanovski, 1 second of control time for Volkanovski's opponent. So if Brian Ortega is thinking that he wants to use his grappling in order to get this fight to a place where Volkanovski is not going to be as comfortable, we're not seeing a lot of evidence in the numbers that Ortega is going to be successful trying to do that. Ortega only a 21.43% takedown accuracy and less than 7% control time in his UFC career, and then only 3.41% control time allowed for Volkanovski, and a 72% takedown defense. So, it does look like Ortega's, if we just look at the numbers as they stand right now, if Ortega wants to get this fight to the ground, I don't see him being successful in doing so. However, if we look at Brian Ortega's takedown defense at 56%, he's only successfully defended 14 of 25 takedown attempts against. He's allowed 1.46 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's allowed 9% control time in the UFC. So I'd just also like to point out that even though I don't think it would be smart for Volkanovski to do so, it does look like there's a minute winning path there in the grappling as well for Volkanovski, as he's got a decent takedown game with 35% accuracy and 2.09 takedowns per 15 minutes. And Brian Ortega, being such a good submission grappler, would probably welcome the opportunity to be taken down and work from his back and use that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt that he is known for. So I think we just need to point out that if Volkanovski, let's say, wants to win the last 30 seconds of a close round, he can shoot a takedown, get it, avoid a submission for 30 seconds, and maybe bank that round. So not only does it look like Volkanovski can win minutes on the feet, but if he wants to try to win minutes on the ground as well, it would be a lot more dangerous than winning minutes on the feet potentially, because Ortega, let's face it, he's dangerous everywhere. But it looks like that door is potentially open to him as well. What are you seeing in these grappling stats?
Yeah, if Volkanovski wants to take Ortega down, Ortega will definitely welcome him. I really don't think he should do that, though. Ortega is just so dangerous. Ortega is somebody that submitted black belts, like Cub Swanson believes a black belt, and Moicano is a black belt. He's very dangerous. I think if I was Volkanovski, I would try to keep it on the feet. But yeah, like you mentioned, maybe there's 20 seconds left. Maybe he shoots in for a takedown and gets it. Stay safe for those 20 seconds. I can definitely see that. But yeah, you mentioned the lack of takedowns for Ortega, right? In his career, He's attempted 28. So it was very interesting to see. You take a look at Ortega's last fight after that layoff against the Korean Zombie, and he attempted 10 takedowns, which is very interesting to me. And he actually got 3 of them, which was pretty impressive because Korean Zombie has a very good takedown defense. And he wasn't really able to do much with those takedowns, but it was encouraging to see that, he actually went for 10 takedowns. He did rack up 57 seconds of control time. Again, Korean Zombie is a very hard guy to take down and an even harder guy to hold down. So, yeah, I'm curious to see if he does, come in here and attempt more takedowns against Volkanovski. Volkanovski obviously has very good takedown defense, but yeah, I mean, I think that this fight is primarily going to stay standing, but I just wanted to point out that it was encouraging to see Ortega went for a lot more takedowns than he typically does. Like 10 takedowns, that's a lot for him. I think that's like 36% of the takedowns in his UFC career he shot in just that last fight against the Korean Zombie. So, but yeah, I primarily think it's going to be standing. But if it does hit the mat in any way, whether it is Volkanovski taking Ortega down, which I don't recommend, or if Ortega is able to somehow get Volkanovski down, I think Volkanovski is going to be in some big trouble there. Like you mentioned, he's defended 0 submissions, you said, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, Ortega is very, very dangerous. I don't think he's going to want to go down to the mat.
Well, also, Volkanovski has only allowed 3.41% control time in his UFC career. So if he wants to, keep this out of the grappling realm, he should be able to. And let me just go over Volkanovski's takedown numbers in his UFC career. So in the first 5 fights against Kasuya, Hirota, Shane Young, Jeremy Kennedy, and Darren Elkins, he was 3 for 3 on takedowns, 4 for 7, 5 for 14, 2 for 3, and 2 for 12. So excellent. I mean, he was really going to that wrestling. And then you look in the last 4 fights, the last 4 fights against Chad Mendez, Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, and Max Holloway. We're seeing 0 for 0, 0 for 3, 0 for 4, and then he actually got 3 takedowns. I don't remember him getting those takedowns, but he only amassed 86 seconds of control time from those 9 takedown attempts from those 3 takedowns. So, yeah, 3 out of 16 on his takedown attempts in the last 4 fights for Volkanovski. And then if we look at Ortega, like you mentioned, 3 of 10 against Chan Sung Jung and 2 of 11 against Max Holloway. So 5 of 21. So right there around that takedown accuracy that he's shown on the aggregate, that's what he's gotten in the last 2 fights. But look at that, 21 takedown attempts from Ortega in the last 2 fights, when if we go the last 7 fights before that, we total up the takedown attempts, there were only 7 of them. So, 3 times as many takedown attempts in the last 2 fights as there were in the first 7. So we are seeing an Ortega that's going more to the wrestling, but even though he's going more to it, he's getting the takedowns at just as efficient as he was prior to that, which is not very efficient. So only 3% control time allowed for Volkanovski, only 7% control time for Ortega. I'm not seeing a path for Ortega to get this fight to the ground if that's where he wants it. I think if Ortega wants to win this fight, he's gonna have to find a big shot standing up. And Volkanovski's a pretty good defensive striker. So I don't know if you're having the same read there.
No, I mean, I think it's an interesting fight because I think Volkanovski is the clear favorite. I do think he should be the favorite. I do think he should win this fight. I think he's going to have a massive striking advantage. Brian Ortega is very hittable. The striking, it looked improved, but I still don't think it's on the level of a Volkanovski. I think he's going to be winning, this fight up until a potential Brian Ortega finish if that happens. But for me, I mean, I think I got to go, I got to lean to the Volkanovski side because he's going to be the minute winner. And outside, if Ortega does not hurt Volkanovski, I just don't see him. I don't see him winning this fight. I think he's going to have to hurt him back on the feet. If it does hit the mat, I think he's going to have to find a submission. And like you said, I don't think it's all that likely. So yeah, I think Volkanovski is the favorite for a reason. I think he should. I think he should be a decent size favorite, not like a crazy big favorite. Maybe like minus 150 seems fair because of just how dangerous Ortega is, and he's going to be live to find a finish for 25 minutes. But if he does not find that finish, I do think he's going to lose a pretty decisive decision.
Yeah, I'm having the same read, man. You know, I like Volkanovski's minute winning potential and round winning potential. I like his ability to be able, at least in the stats from what we're seeing, the ability to keep the fight standing if that's where he wants it. And if it does get desperate for him standing, you know, he could take Ortega down, and as long as he could stay safe there, he could, you know, potentially, you know, stop a situation where he might get finished, you know? So there are a lot of reasons here to like Volkanovski. He's already the championship. I mean, he's already the champion. So in that case, sometimes you have to do a little bit better than you normally would in order to win a close decision.
Yep.
You know, you got to beat the champion in order to be the champion. And we've seen that time and time again. In a close fight, the decision goes the champion's way. And I think one of the best examples of that might have been in the Max Holloway Alexander Volkanovski rematch. So, but let's look at these strength of schedule stats here because they're important. Both of these guys have been fighting nothing but killers, it looks like. And when we just look at my stats and the metrics that I keep, we've got a 2.39 win to loss ratio in Volkanovski's opponents and a 1.79 for Ortega. So that's both very high. They're both fighting very good opponents. Ortega's opponents have been more experienced on the aggregate at 16.44 total fights compared to 12.44 for Volkanovski. Volkanovski's average opponent that he's fought has an 8.78 win and 3.67 loss record, while for Ortega, it's 10.56 wins and 5.89 losses. So they're both fighting studs, but on the aggregate, I would give Volkanovski a slight edge. If we look at their wins, a 2.39 ratio for Volkanovski and a 1.77 ratio for Ortega. They're both beating killers. Ortega, the more experienced opponent with a slightly worse win-loss ratio. Volkanovski's opponent that he's beating slightly better on the win-loss ratio, slightly less experienced than the ones Ortega are beating. You know, it's the same for the wins as overall for Volkanovski because he hasn't lost any fights. And we know that Ortega's only loss comes to Max Holloway. So when it comes to the strength of schedule in the last five, I have to give Volkanovski the advantage because he's got the better ratio in the wins and overall, and the MMA math favors him as he has 2 unanimous decision victories over Max Holloway, while Brian Ortega has lost via knockout to Max Holloway. So I'm given a strength of schedule advantage here to Alex Volkanovski. I'm giving a slight experience edge to Volkanovski, and I'm giving a big minute winning and round winning striking statistics edge to Volkanovski. But the grappling statistics, even though I think they favor Volkanovski, I think we both know that if this fight gets to the grappling, we know which one of these guys is more dangerous, period. And that's definitely Ortega. So I'm giving advantage of strength of schedule, striking, and experience to Volkanovski. The finish stats and the grappling I'm giving to Ortega. I got to lean Volkanovski here. I have to pick Volkanovski here, and I think I'm going to pick him by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you there as well. We'll take a look at the line here. We have Volkanovski opening up -185. He's currently -175. Ortega opening up +160. He is currently +150. Some other props that did stick out to me. Volkanovski by decision. I see it at +150 on DraftKings Sportsbook, +125 on Bet Online there. And yeah, I think if he does win, it's by decision. Like Ortega is very, very, very tough. He showed that in the Max Holloway fight. I mean, the TKO was a cut stoppage. So he absorbed 290 strikes and just kept going up until that cut stoppage, right? So I don't know. I don't think he's going to knock out somebody as tough as Brian Ortega. I think he just, wins a decision over 25 minutes. So if I was to bet Volkanovski, which I'm probably not, I'm probably going to stay away from this fight for the most part, but I guess that's something that did stick out was the Volkanovski +150 by decision on DraftKings Sportsbook. As far as Ortega, if you do like the Ortega side, I'd probably go inside the distance like we talked about. I don't think there's much minute winning potential for him. I bet he'll have some moments here and there. Maybe he lands a big shot. Maybe he hurts Volkanovski, at some points in the fight. But I think for him to win the fight, it's going to have to be inside the distance. I just don't see a path to victory where Ortega wins a decision here, to be honest. And we do see Ortega wins inside the distance at plus 175 on DraftKings Sportsbook. So on top of that, we have the fight doesn't go to decision, again, plus 120. Fight goes to decision, minus 150. They have the over-under set at 4.5 rounds, over 4.5 rounds, minus 140. The under 4.5 rounds, plus 110. So we talked about a couple props there. Reezy, anything stick out to you in terms of the money line? Any props, any totals, anything?
I'm having a hard time with the fight goes or the fight doesn't go, because it's one of those situations where I kind of think that line is baked into the win conditions for each fighter. So I think that because, Volkanovski's favored to win this fight at minus 160, putting him at a 62% implied probability, something like that, that you figure that maybe this fight goes the distance more because you see Volkanovski winning by decision, while they've got fight doesn't go at plus money, juiced up to about plus 120 right now at one of these books. But other than that, it goes from minus 110 to plus 105. And I think that if the fight doesn't go to decision, it'll be because Ortega wins. So I think the best way to play the time props is either to bet Volkanovski by decision if you like the Volkanovski side, and then go Ortega inside the distance if you like the Ortega side. And guess what? Ortega inside the distance right now is plus 275 on most books, and that's actually available and out there, even on some more accessible books like DraftKings. So yeah, that's the way I'm seeing to play the time props, is just to play the fighter's win conditions, and that would be Ortega inside the distance or Volkanovski by decision.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to attack it. I don't have a bet on this fight. I know it sucks not having a bet on the main event, but I probably won't. But if I was, like you said, the Ortega inside the distance plus 275, and then the Volkanovski by decision is what stuck out to me the most. So any other final thoughts, anything else you want to point out in terms of this fight?
Yeah, in terms of this fight and the whole card, I'm kind of finding myself having a hard time getting the bets on this card. And I think half the reason, or maybe 2/3 of the reason for that is that so many of these fights are just entertaining on their own that I don't even need to have money on them necessarily in order to enjoy the fights. And this is kind of one of them, but there are several like that. I mean, Diaz Lawler being one of them, Hack Parast Hooker being one of them, where maybe you've got some missing information so you don't feel like betting it, but fuck, you want to watch those fights. They're going to be great, and up and down this card, great fights that if you don't find something that sticks out, you can just sit back and enjoy the fight. But I am leaning Volkanovski here pretty heavily. That Volkanovski at plus money by decision sticks out for me, and I could see myself going there. And then also plus 275 Ortega inside the distance. That's kind of sticking out too. But other than that, what's just sticking out is how entertaining of a fight this is going to be.
It's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a war, and I'm looking forward to it for sure. So, yeah, guys, that's about it. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you guys can leave a like on your way out, go follow Weezy on Twitter, MMA Weezy. Also has a YouTube channel as well, putting out a ton of content week in and week out. And, yeah, it's a good fight. It's a great card. Can't wait to break it all down. Check out my full card breakdown and prediction video. It'll be posted on Tuesday morning. If you have not yet, go check out Stat Diggers. We posted it, excuse me, Sunday, excuse me, on Pub Sports Radio. We do the same thing we did here. We go balls deep into every single fight, not just this one. So go check that out if you have not yet already. So that's about it. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck for UFC 266. Enjoy the card. It's going to be a phenomenal